educational critical review and reaction is the late, great Jordan Maxwell.
First of all, the whole story of Noah's Ark, the great boat, that's a very ancient story going back to the Sumerians. 1,000, 1,500 years before the Hebrews ever would have even existed. There was already a very big story called the Gilgamesh Epic. It's called the Gilgamesh Epic, in which the story was, now this is ancient Sumeria, the ancient, what we call today Iraqis. The ancient Sumerian records. There's a story, a very famous story now, all over the world that's known. It's called the Gilgamesh Epic. The story was that there was an old man who God favored, who was told that there was a flood coming, and that he built an ark, and on the ark he put all the animals and all the people that was going to be saved when the world was inundated by a great flood, and afterwards he saved the animals and people through the great flood. They took that story and shined it all up and spray painted it and lacquered it all up.
Another wives' tale.
Another wives' tale, and put it into the Bible and called it the flood of Noah's day. Very interesting, though, because when they put the story of Noah's Ark into the Bible, there's a lot of interesting stuff that they added that most people don't even know was added, and the implications of what was added to that old ancient story. So I'm just saying, I don't think there was a Noah who ever existed. I don't think that there was a great, obviously, this is obvious. There was no great flood on the earth. There was never a great flood on the earth. It would be impossible. It's totally scientifically impossible to have a worldwide flood, because the Bible said that the flood was so fierce that it was something, how many cubits above the highest peak on the earth? Well, the highest peak on the earth is Mount Everest. So the flood would have been as high as Mount Everest.
38,000 feet or something.
Okay, so then it was cubics above that. It's impossible for the earth to have had an earth-wide flood. Where'd all the water go if it's higher than Mount Everest? And where'd it come from? And where'd it go to when it receded? Where the hell can it recede if the whole earth is covered with water way past Mount Everest? Where did it recede to, for God's sake? The whole earth is covered with water,
and it just evaporate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, where would it evaporate? It evaporates in our atmosphere and comes back as rain.
It rains, exactly.
Obviously, there was not a worldwide flood. That's obvious. So there's just an awful lot of things that we're being told that are based on ancient stories, based on hidden things which are in fact true, but have been hidden from us and given to us as other stories, But it's just interesting how much we don't know about the world that we live in, or how much is known, but the people don't know. It's interesting that the Egyptians, how would I say it? They kept records of everything. The Egyptians were record keepers. They wrote down everything. Anything that happened in any province, any group, or anything that happened in Egypt was written down. They had copious records of everything. As a matter of fact, if you want to get really technical about the lost Ark of the Covenant, go back to the book of Revelation. The book of Revelation says that I saw in heaven when I was there, I saw the Ark of the Covenant. And the Ark of the Covenant was in heaven, and I was there and I saw it. That's in the book of Revelation. So if they can't find the lost Ark, today, the Jews have been looking for the lost Ark for God knows how long, can't find it. Well, hell, the book of Revelation says it's in heaven, Arrowhead.
They're looking in the wrong spot.
So if you want to die and go to heaven, of course everybody wants to go to heaven, but ain't nobody wants to die.
Right.
But if you want to go find that lost Ark, well, the Bible says it's in heaven. I say no, the lost Ark of the Hebrews is actually Egyptian Ark of the Contract. The Egyptians had something called the Ark of the Contract. Well, in Hebrew, a contract is a covenant. And so the Hebrews took that story from the Egyptians, the lost Ark of the Contract, and they changed it to the Lost Ark of the Covenant. A covenant is a contract, right? Well, in Egypt, the story was, and you can go to any good reference work on Egypt and look up the word Ark of the Contract. The Egyptians had an ark, which they carried with two poles, and they had two angels with wings bent over on the top of it, the mercy seat. The whole thing is an Egyptian story.
If you go back to Babylon, the ancient gates to Babylon are actually still in Berlin, and it actually is the gates to the museum in Berlin.
That's exactly right. And Berlin has been... The Germans are taken with the idea of Babylon. The Germans love that subject of the Babylon, while the British are heavy into Egypt for some reason. And in England, everything is Egyptian. Go to all the museums and the British Museum, everything is Egyptian. The British were really involved with researching Egypt, while the Germans, on the other hand, were far more interested in Babylon. And
the entire Nazi philosophy was
based
pagan,
on
symbolic.
All of it
was
occultism coming directly out of Babylon. And Babylon, incidentally, is what we call Iraq today.
Yeah.
So the Germans,
the Tigers and Euphrates, back
that's
to
right.
the rivers.
That's exactly right. And so that's why Adolf Hitler and the Nazis were very interested in Iraq. And I would suggest that you better look at the whole idea of Iraq being ancient Babylon would explain why the United States is in Iraq. It's because Iraq was ancient Babylon, and that the Germans were very interested in Babylon. Well, if you're talking about the Germans, now you're talking about the Nazis. Well, if you're talking about the Nazis, then you're talking about the Nazis in the U.S. government.
Well, that's under Paperclip, where they were all
That's
brought
right,
here legally.
Operation Paperclip. And when all of the top Nazis were brought to America, all the top scientists, theoreticians, all the best minds in Germany were immediately gotten out of Germany when the war was over, and they knew they were losing. Just before they declared the end of the war, the Germans were getting out of Germany. They figured they better, because the Russians are coming, and they're going to kill everybody. The Germans wanted out of Germany as quick as possible. Since the war is over and they've lost, you better get out of town because the Russians are coming. So what did they do? They wanted to get out of Germany, but the powers that be on this planet were not interested in all Germans. The working class Germans, let them die. But the guys who are really smart, the theoreticians, the scientists, the physicists, the rocketeers, or the rocket engineers, those people who got good minds, you better save them. You can use those guys. So they got all of the real brains out of Germany quickly before the Russians came in. Now, how did they do that? They did that with the Vatican. The Vatican, the Holy Father and the Vatican, provided false passports, new identification, money, and safe passage for all the top Nazis coming out of Nazi Germany quickly, to get them out quick. So it was called the Vatican Rat Line, R-A-T, Rat Line. Look it up in any good reference work, and you'll see the Vatican provided safe passage, new passports, new identification, falsified passports, and money, and also safe passage to all Vatican-held territories, like South America, Central America.
Well, that's the boys from Brazil.
Like the boys from Brazil. That's it. And so, but those guys, those Germans, ended up in America. When they brought those German Nazis into this country in 1947, 48, and 49 under Operation Paperclip, they were bringing into this country extraordinarily brilliant people. These German Nazis were not stupid. They knew exactly how to walk the walk and talk the talk. They put on the Hawaiian shirts. And
Plum Island, which is the secret test base off of Montauk, which is scientists from Paperclip that actually formed it. And that's where all
incredible stuff.
Human, animal, germ warfare, top secret island. You can't get there, general public. It's controlled by Homeland Security.
Where exactly is Plum Island?
Plum Island's a little island off the coast of Montauk at the tip of Long Island. And you can only get there by boat. And it's a U.S. secret animal testing area for bio warfare. There was a grant given to some ex-Paperclip Nazis.
Yeah. That's a whole story, too, about how there was a lot of experimentation going on here in America between crossbreeding animals with humans. As a matter of fact, crossbreeding humans and animals has been going on a long time in this country and across the world by the secret Nazi powers. That's a real story. I mean, they've got today, I mean, this is a whole subject we could talk about for hours on crossbreeding humans with animals and how the Nazis had this whole idea about restructuring the whole human race to be nothing more than little more than just animals. They wanted to create a working class people on the earth that would be able to do their job, put the screws in the bolts and do their job, but would be animalistic in their thinking, in that they would not require anything humans require.
Well, the big person that received the grant for that, his name was Jason Bourne. There actually was a CIA agent. His name was Jason Bourne. And Jason Bourne received a lot of U.S. funding. This goes back into the late 60s, early 70s. There's an area in Georgia where they were testing chimpanzees and breeding gorillas and crossbreeding them.
Yeah,
all kinds of fun stuff. And actually, Jason Bourne has a book, and you can Google the name Jason Bourne. There's a book that he wrote through stem cell research back in the 1970s when they were originally pioneering this. Supposedly, and in this book that Jason Bourne wrote, true story, I guess it was a female where they inseminated her with stem cells and then the sperm from a gorilla, and this actually chimpanzee human was born.
There is a whole move that was eugenics movement is tied into this too. This whole idea of breeding a superman, breeding a different kind of race, and then crossbreeding the rest of humanity down. Ivan Pavlov and his companion A.R. Luria were scientists in pre-communist Russia who were doing experiments with animals, and especially with dogs, on how to control the animal's mind, how to control the thinking of an animal. And it's very famous, Pavlov's dog. A lot of people know about that. But there's a lot more that Pavlov and A.R. Luria were doing besides the dog experiment. Like I said, there's just so much to this subject of how the world is run today that we're just totally not aware of. We have no idea in the world about any of this. None of it's been told to the people. None of it will be told to the people, because this kind of knowledge is what is considered to be information on a need-to-know basis. And the people who run the planet don't figure you need to know. But if you start doing research on what Ronald Reagan, for instance, a classic example of this crossbreeding animals with humans, there was something happened during Ronald Reagan's presidency where there was massive marine divisions was sent into the Caribbean to an island called Grenada, and then Grenada, the Marines went in under orders from the president, went in and completely devastated that island. There's a little old tiny Mickey Mouse little island called Grenada. And the U.S. military went in there and just leveled that island. It wasn't that big a deal. Nobody knows. Nobody cares. No, even the blacks that are living here in L.A., they didn't even know there was a Grenada. It's such a small little island. But the U.S. government decided to level that island. I mean, clean it off, level it. So they sent in troops and just devastated that island overnight under presidential order. Well, then you become to find out what was going on Grenada. And that's a whole story, and about what was it, 5 different countries I heard, 5 different countries were involved in Grenada. Austria, Germany, England, America, and who else? There was another one. But there was like 5 different countries they had collectively put together a university on Grenada. There was 602 instructors, I think it was, and 600 students. They had 2 more instructors than they did students. From what I gather, there was a lot of human crossbreeding with animals and humans on the island of Grenada, and the Cubans found out about it and were going to expose it, and immediately this government decided to shut down that whole operation quick. So they went down and shut down the whole operation on Grenada overnight, quickly, because the Cubans found out what was going on, and if it ever got out that America was in business with the Nazis down in Grenada, crossbreeding children and animals with humans and all this kind of stuff really going on.
I've been down to Grenada a few times, traveling the island on a little Jeep. Very bizarre. The people, there's a lot of voodoos prevalent down there, like in Haiti. And
well, I'll bet there is.
Very bizarre place. You know, it's the Spice Islands, and there's a lot of unique things taking place. I just felt a very bizarre place just traveling through.
Well, I mean, is Grenada what was pictured in the motion pictures, 3 different movies that were made in Hollywood called The Island of Dr. Moreau?
I'd have to look that one up.
Yeah. Because back in 1938-39, Charles Lawton, a very famous movie star back then, back in 38-39, made a movie called The Island of Lost Souls. And it was about an island in the Caribbean where governments were coming together to experiment on crossbreeding animals with humans. If you could come up with a human that you didn't have to pay, and you could just feed him a couple of sugar cubes every day, and he would work for you all day long. So they wanted to develop that kind of a civilization where we'd have nothing but millions of workers to do our work, and collectively wouldn't have to pay them anything. They just work all day long like a horse and like a donkey, and we just give them some sugar cubes or something, and they will work all day long. But that was, as crazy as that sounds, that's exactly what they were trying to do, is develop some kind of a civilization where 99% of the civilization would be animals, and there would only be a handful of people at the top who would be controlling finances and the rest of the world for the handful that controls the world. And so they made a movie back in 1938 called The Island of Lost Souls. And then later on in 1956, I think it was 1956, Burt Lancaster remade the movie and called it The Island of Dr. Moreau. What's his name? Marlon Brando. His last movie, before he died, was a remake of the 1956 Island of Dr. Moreau. And, you need to watch those movies, Island of Dr. Moreau. I mean, that isn't scary, showing how humans were being crossbred with animals. Why would they make 3 movies like that? As far back as 1938, The Island of Lost Souls, Charles Lawton. And then The Island of Dr. Moreau, an island in the Caribbean, or the island wherever it is in the movie, but it was actually in the Caribbean, where they were crossbreeding animals with humans. I am suggesting today that there's no doubt in my mind at all that that's exactly what's going on right now. They're just not telling us. There's no doubt in my mind at all that there's this kind of experimentation going on right now, crossbreeding animals with humans. Absolutely no doubt in my mind at all. Because I know the people who are running this planet want the planet to be filled with people who are not going to give you any problems. They're not going to cry about their paychecks or their unions or anything. You just feed them, give them something to eat, give them some cheap beer, and they'll go out and work all day long, all night long, and they're animals, and like animals. And all you got to do is give them something to entertain them. So you give them something to entertain them, like cage fighting, because the animals love to fight. So put the dogs in there and let them fight and kill each other and beat each other up, and all the other animals full of beer and liquor and an IQ of 4, they'll sit there and watch the animals fight, and they love it. And so they'll go to work and work for you all day long and do whatever you tell them to do. They'll never question anything because they have no education and no way to think about anything anyway. So it's really quite an interesting arrangement that the powers that be on this earth have got planned for the human race.
Well, they can't be doing it for themselves because no one lives that long.
Well, that's a good point.
So what's the end game?
Well,
Well, we know the end game. What's the now game?
Yeah. Well, it's just my opinion, because that requires, that question, very good question, but that question requires a personal opinion, a subjective opinion.
Okay.
I think that the powers that be, it's just my opinion, but I think that the people who are running this planet today, and I'm not talking about Obama, I'm talking about the people who have the power to run the world.
Mm-hmm.
And those people, I will guarantee you, the people who run this planet today, you will never, ever, under any circumstances, ever hear their names or see their picture, ever. The bosses of this planet, you will never know who they are, and you will never see their name in print, ever. Because they are not interested in publicity to be a movie star. They run the planet. And so it's better for them to stay out of the way, let everybody, all the movie stars go out and be all that silly nonsense, and let the president, Obama loves it, and everybody loves to see him. But the real guys who run this planet, who finance and run this planet, they don't need for you to see them at all.
Well, back to the Jason Bourne, it was actually called Operation Treadstone 71, and it was a top secret black ops program funded by the Central Intelligence Agency. The actual officer that was in charge of it was Jason Bourne, who this movie character was playing.
And it was Treadstone in that movie, too.
Yes, well, it was Operation Treadstone, and it was a black ops operation, and the government was trying to create this almost like Planet of the Apes crossbred humanoid chimpanzees or gorillas that were able to become warlike.
You need to go back and do your homework. Hollywood's trying to tell you something. Dick Gregory said it best. Hollywood does three things. They tell you what your masters who own the planet, what they have done in the past, what they're doing right now, and what they're getting ready to do.
Prepare the masses for what's about to happen.
Precisely. Prepare the masses for what... Look at, I told you before, if you're the captain of one of the largest oil tankers on the earth, you cannot maneuver that large of a ship on the open seas like you can an automobile. It don't work that way. That thing is so huge, so heavy, and so long that you have to plan 10 to 15 miles ahead what you're going to do. That's the captain's job. You got to know where this ship is going to be, 2 hours from now out there, and there's going to be reefs there. Is it going to be too shallow? That's what a captain has to know. Keep it out in the deep water, and if you're going to turn it around, you're not going to turn it around like an automobile. You're going to take the next 5 hours it's going to cost to take, you're going to have to begin to move it a little bit to the left and start speeding it up, and then 2 hours from now, you'll be in enough position that you'll be able to turn it, and 2 hours later, so in 5 hours, you'll be able to turn the ship around. It's not going to be quick. You got an oil tanker out there on the high seas. You're not going to turn that sucker around very quick.
Well, that's what all the programming, and the scary thing is if you look at a lot of the movies that are coming out of the previews, it's all about pandemics and, aliens and all this stuff that,
They got plans, but it takes time.
Revolution.
Revolution.
That's the new TV series. It's
but it takes time, so you got to prepare the people a little bit. Keep preparing them a little bit.
Well, how about Red Dawn, the remaking of that one, where China actually comes in and invades U.S. soil? I mean, that's a little spooky. If you think about all the debt that the U.S. has incurred or sold our treasuries to the Chinese government and
China, of course. Joseph Smith, the founder of the Mormon Church, Joseph Smith, back in 1800s, Joseph Smith gave a prophecy, a very famous prophecy to the Mormons, and he said that one day, at the end of time, at the great conflagration, or Armageddon, the end of the world, whatever, that the Chinese would actually attack America. They would come to our country and flood into our country to attack America. That was his prophecy, Joseph Smith of the Mormon Church. And he said that the Mexicans would come in to help America fight off the Chinese, and that they would be successful, that they would be able to defeat the Chinese in battle. And I just think that's interesting. I don't know how many Mormons are aware of that Joseph Smith actually, in his prophecy, said that China would attack America, would be on our land. Well, there's just no doubt in my mind at all that Chinese forces are already here. They just haven't shown themselves yet. They don't need to because they run your ports now. They own your ports. They own all the seaports. They're controlling all of your commerce back and forth. So... Look, it's like the mafia. They move in and they buy your house for you and they buy your car and they put your kids to school and they pay this and they pay that. One day you got to figure out they're not doing this because they love you.
Yeah,
they own you.
Oh,
they bought you. And and so whenever they give you a suggestion, we'd like to see you do this and that. That's the orders from God. That's God's word. They own you. So that when they say they would suggest you do something, it means this is what we want you to do.
I remember looking at photographs of Shanghai. My grandfather used to go over there in the 70s doing business, and I'll never forget photographs of him with the Shanghai skyline, which was a couple buildings. And now if you look at Shanghai and all the different provinces...
It's huge.
Well, look at the longest bullet train in the world just opened up last week. If you look at what they've put into their infrastructure... It's mind-boggling.
It is.
And in the United States, I mean, you look at our trains, Amtrak, it looks like a 1950s third world country.
You know why? Because we are a 1950s third world country. That's why it looks that way.
Yeah.
That's why it looks that way.
Look at our infrastructure in New York and Los Angeles. The big cities are just crumbling. You know, you walk across any bridge in America, they were built in the 1950s or the 1930s.
That's right.
And they're all crumbling apart.
That's right. I mean, the mayor of Los Angeles, everybody calls him Mayor Pothole because all the potholes and the streets are falling apart. And it's just absolutely outrageous what has happened to the great American Republic. Now, logic alone would tell you, you don't have to be a rocket scientist or a neurophysicist to understand, a neurosurgeon to understand. You take the most powerful military-industrial complex on the face of the earth, which was the American military-industrial complex after the Second World War. You take the wealthiest country in the world, the most freest country in the world, that dominated the planet. America dominated the world. Today, America is nothing more than fear, broke, scared to death. I'm just amazed. I mean, I don't know anybody else sees it. But look I don't have a horse in this race. I'm 72 years old. I don't own any property. I have no wife, no family, no bank account, no checking book, no credit card. I don't own anything, got nothing, and have nothing. So I don't have a horse in this race at all. I'm just looking at the facts of life because I've studied history for the past 7,000 years of human history. And I can tell you, something's going on. And the only way America could be broke on its knees and frightened and thrown into prison is what I call treason, high crimes and treason against the American Republic.
You look at our prison population alone, and if you look at the Prison Corporation of America, it's a privately owned company.
That's right.
They get their bond financing based on cities and states and the federal government committing to fill their prisons,
people that they will
95% occupancy.
Let's talk about that next time.
I think it's a great subject. We'll close in Richard Pryor's famous quote, "Justice, just us."